Alright everyone, so I want to talk to you guys about communism. Last night I was reading on uh, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong's revolutionary Chinese government, and how he wanted everyone to work in a agricultural, agrarian, farming community, and everyone was going to be a part of this community, and so he forced the Chinese population into living in these communes where people were forced to work. Of course, it was all about working for the greater good, working for the collective, for the people, the Volk. And so those who were considered as not contributing enough, or those who were considered as not conforming to the communalism, to the commune, or to the communist ideology, well, these people were killed, and they were killed in horrific ways by the tens of millions. Mao Zedong, in just a matter of years, we're talking from 1958 to 1962, Mao Zedong butchered 45 million people, and some say that actually more than that number were killed. So I want to read to you guys a quote from an historian. His name is Frank de Cotter, and he wrote a book called Mao's Great Famine. And I want to read to you guys an excerpt from this book. Quote, Mao thought that he could catapult his country past its competitors by herding villagers across the country into giant people's communes. In pursuit of a utopian paradise, everything was collectivized. Sounds like the French Revolution. People had their work, homes, land, belongings, and livelihoods taken from them. In collective canteens, food, distributed by the spoonful according to merit, became a weapon used to force people to follow the party's every dictate. As incentives to work were removed, coercion and violence were used instead to compel famished farmers to perform labor on poorly planned irrigation projects while fields were neglected. So it's very interesting. Anytime I hear about, well, these people did a revolution and they wanted everyone to be equal. They wanted everyone to be equal. Well, it turns out that they wanted everyone to be equal, but they wanted everyone to be equal to zero because human life meant nothing to these revolutionaries. You see this in the French Revolution, you see this in the Mexican Revolution, and you see this in the communist regime of Mao Zedong. And so it's interesting to me because the irony is so in your face. You have these people who talk about equality for all and how these evil capitalists, these evil industrialists, or it's the landowners, these evil landowners or landlords, you see, they just want to exploit your labor. They just want to use you, and they don't want people to be equal. They want a hierarchy where they are the elites, and they want everyone else to be their slaves. And so we have to do a revolution and bring about enforced equality for all, and everyone is going to be equal in our wonderful utopia. And then what happens when they take power? What happens is that they become the elitists. They become the members of the highest part of their own case system. And so those who are seen at the bottom, well, they're seen as either not contributing for the greater good, or they are seen as enemies of equality, enemies of the revolution, which would bring about this utopian vision that we wish to manifest with such amazing vigor and enthusiasm and passion and willpower. And so it is the will of the people that must be honored, and so these traitors must be executed. And so we see this pattern in so many revolutions in history. And so it's like they have this idea that the capitalists are the evil people, the ones who are making the money, the ones who are paying the employees, the ones who are owning the land, the ones who are renting out the property. These people are so evil, but yet when they take power, they become tyrants. They become worse than the people that they claimed to have been fighting against. And so their government system becomes truly elitist and truly hierarchical, and viciously hierarchical, I should say, where people who are seen as not contributing enough are seen as worthy of death, worthy of being tortured to death, worthy of being buried alive, worthy of horrendous enslavement. So anytime it's like people who are anarchists, they say, well, the evil government is the problem. Government is the source of all of our problems. We have to get rid of government. So then they overthrow the government, and I'm talking in a very hypothetical way here. They overthrow the government, and then what happens? They become the government. The French Revolution, the king is this evil monarch. He is this evil tyrant. We have to overthrow the king, destroy the king, kill the monarchy, overthrow the throne, topple the entire regime that has been ruling France for centuries. Get rid of it all. So then they get rid of it all, they shatter the entire system, and then what happens? Well, they become truly the tyrants. They become truly the elitists. And so all of the peasants that they claim to have been fighting against, all the peasants that the revolutionaries were claiming to have been defending, the peasants are the ones who suffer the most out of anyone else. Because at the end of the day, it's not about helping the peasant, it's not about the working class, it's not about helping the laborer and getting rid of the evil exploiter of labor. At the end of the day, it's about power. Vladimir Lenin himself said this. He said that my entire goal is the acquisition, it's the grabbing of power, it's the acquiring of power. And so, at the end of the day, that's all this is about. It's not about capitalism versus communism. It's not about, well, helping the laborer versus exploiting the laborer. It's, at the end of the day, power and exploitation. At the end of the day, it's about being on the top. It's about being the haves and not the have-nots. It's about taking away from the haves and also taking away from the have-nots. I remember years ago when I first started speaking, there was this saying that I came up with, and I used to tell this to everyone that I talked to when I used to do talks at churches and various events. I used to tell people that a communist is a capitalist that wants everyone else to be a communist. They want to be the ones who hold all the money, they want to be the ones who hold all of the profit, and they want to gain everything, they want to take what's not theirs, and then they want everyone else to be a member of the commune. They want everyone else to be a member of a collective community where, well, everyone is essentially a slave to your new regime. There's one part of Frank Dikötter's quote that I want to focus on a little bit here. He says, as incentives to work were removed, coercion and violence were used instead to compel famished farmers to perform labor on poorly planned irrigation. So those who were seen as not working hard enough, they were killed. They were killed. So essentially, communism is capitalism on steroids. And I know you're going to say, well, that's not really capitalism. Corporatism and capitalism are not the same. Okay, fine, whatever. I'm not saying that this is, equal to Burger King. Okay, I'm not making that argument here. I'm not saying this is equal to legitimate businesses. What I'm saying is that communism is, in a way, capitalism in a very, 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 very insidious, destructive, and evil and sinister manner. That's pretty much what communism is. No matter what system you live under, there are going to be wealthy people. No matter what system you live under, there are going to be poor people. That's just the reality that we live in. It's why when Judas the traitor told Jesus, when the prostitute came and she put perfume on Jesus' feet and she washed Jesus' feet, and Judas said, well, why wasn't this bottle of perfume sold and given to the poor? We could have actually helped poor folks. And Judas was being the liberation theologian that he was. And Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. Essentially saying, stop using the presence of the poor to justify your own motives. Because remember what the gospel says after that. The reason why Judas said this wasn't because he cared about the poor, it's because he was a thief. And that, at the end of the day, encapsulates and truly defines the actual spirit of the revolutionary. At the end of the day, the revolutionary is not someone who cares about the people that he's claiming to be fighting for. At the end of the day, he is a thief who is trying to steal power. That is the bottom line. You can even make this comparison to the American Revolution. I know I'm going to be stepping on some toes here, but the American Revolution was all about what? Going against taxation without representation. Oh, the British are taxing us, even though the American colonies weren't really taxed all that much. But once the rebels took over and the British were thrown out, what was the end result? Well, we're still getting taxed up the ass. It doesn't really matter. So much for your revolution. So no matter what you do, someone's going to be taxing you. Someone's going to be making you work. Someone is going to be ruling over you. There's going to be poor people and there's going to be rich people. The question that we should be asking is not whether or not we can get rid of poverty or get rid of the presence of people being poor or getting rid of the rich, because that's completely impossible, and any sort of attempt to make this sort of thing manifest would just lead to bloodshed and butchery. The question is, how do we create a society where poor people and rich people can live in harmony and have a mutual relationship without killing each other and without abusing each other? This way we can prevent the exploitation and enslavement of laborers, and we can prevent also peasant revolts where thousands of people are butchered in horrific ways. And we saw this with the English peasant revolt. We also saw this with the French peasant revolt that took place, I want to say, in the 13th century or so. At the end of the day, when people talk about, oh, we have to get rid of this system, capitalist system, what they really mean to say is, I want to be in power and I want to hold all the wealth. The people who talk about, we got to redistribute the wealth, what they really mean to say is they want to take money from other people and then give it to other people who didn't work for it. They want power over the money. They want power over the finances. Anytime you've had a revolutionary event and people were overthrown and the government was toppled, what you ended up with was something worse. Usually this is what happens. We also saw this with the Cuban Revolution. Che Guevara and Castro were involved in that, and they were fighting the government of Batista, and supposedly Batista was this evil dictator and he was so horrible. And now you have Cubans who hate communism so much that they consistently vote Republican, more so than any other ethnic group in the United States. So it's super fascinating how these things work. I remember years ago speaking to an anarchist. He was from Mexico, and he was a hardcore anarchist who hated the Catholic Church, and he wanted to see the complete abolition of all government. Him and I would get into these arguments. And he was a very intelligent person. But nonetheless, he had very insidious ideas. And I remember he told me about how the state is evil and the government is evil and all these things. Well, one day I brought up the Cristero Revolt. And I thought maybe he would support the Cristero Revolt because the Cristero Revolt was a bunch of Christian peasant people who were tired of the government persecuting them for their religion, and so they had a revolution, and there was a small civil war that took place in Mexico, which was mainly concentrated within the state of Jalisco. And so this anarchist guy began to tell me about how the Cristeros were terrible, and I said, "So are you saying that you support the regime of Plutarco Elias Calles? Because this is when this persecution was taking place, it was done under this dictator, this tyrant." And so he began to actually defend Plutarco Elias Calles, and he also began to defend the execution of various Cristero rebels. And I thought that was absolutely ironic, and it actually revealed more. It really reflected his own ideology and his actual motives. His motives weren't really about getting rid of state tyranny or getting rid of despotism. His motives were truly about acquiring power, because if his true intentions were the removal of tyranny and despotism, of course he would be completely against Plutarco Elias Calles, and he would be supporting these Cristero rebels. But the fact was that he supported the despot, and which really indicated to me that he was in reality a statist who masqueraded himself as an anarchist. And if he were to take power, he would be just like Plutarco Elias Calles, or even worse. His problem wasn't really with government. His problem was with the current state of authority that he didn't like, and he simply wanted another form of authority to take its place. It's like heresy. People say, well, these heretics were against the church because they merely wanted to read the Bible. And that's complete BS, but you hear this sort of narrative coming from Protestants all the time. The reality was that the heretics weren't being the heretics weren't active because they just merely wanted to read the Bible. The heretics were active because they wanted their interpretation of the Bible to be the established religion. And so they wanted to get rid of the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church had an interpretation of Scripture that they didn't like. That's pretty much what it comes down to every single time. So anytime someone says, well, they're for the peasant class, and they want to get rid of inequality, what that really means is that they want their own form of inequality to be established, where certain people get their rights removed, or certain people are killed, and certain people are put into camps. When they say that they are for income equality, what they really mean to say is they want to control the wealth, and they want to dictate the manner in which that wealth is distributed. When they say, well, they're for the laborer, what they really mean to say is they want to control labor, and they want certain people to work, and certain people to have the ability to live in a leisurely manner. National Socialism was truly just hardcore capitalism. It was capitalism to a very extremist and fanatical degree, in which the state and corporation were pretty much converged together. That's why, for example, big corporations like IG Farben ran death camps. That's why the SS was literally doing slave trading and people trafficking, and they were selling slaves to big corporations that wanted them for their slave labor camps. The tyranny of the state and the tyranny of the corporation were synonymous. Mao Zedong saying, you're not working hard enough for the commune, you're going to be killed or you're going to be buried alive. That's basically like the CEO of a corporation saying, well, these people aren't working hard enough, so I'm going to have them executed. Communism, at the end of the day, is just capitalism with steroids. That's pretty much what it is. I've talked long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.